The espresso machine was still running when I walked through the front door. I remember that detail specifically. The sound of it, that low mechanical hiss, because it meant he'd just made himself a cup. He was home, which didn't make sense because he texted me 40 minutes earlier, saying he was stuck in a client meeting downtown and wouldn't be back until 9. It was 6:40. I'd taken an early flight back from Portland. The product launch had wrapped a day ahead of schedule, and my manager had practically pushed me out the door. Go home, get some rest, you've earned it. I hadn't told my husband I was coming back early. I thought I'd surprise him. Maybe order from that Thai place he liked, open a bottle of wine, have a normal evening together for once. We hadn't had one of those in a while. I'd been too tired lately to figure out why. I set my carry-on down by the door and called out his name. Nothing. The espresso machine cycled off. The house went quiet in that specific way houses do when they're not as empty as they're pretending to be. I walked into the kitchen. His jacket was draped over the bar stool, the gray one he'd worn to work that morning. His phone was on the counter, face down. 2 mugs sat on the island. 2. I stood there for a long moment looking at those 2 mugs. Then I heard the floorboard creak upstairs. I'm not someone who panics easily. I've always been the one in the room who stays calm, who thinks before she reacts, who waits for more information before drawing a conclusion. My mother used to say I had a courtroom brain, measured, slow to convict. I'd taken that as a compliment for most of my life. Standing in my kitchen looking at 2 coffee mugs, I was grateful for it. I didn't call out again. I didn't walk upstairs. I stood very still and I thought about what I actually knew versus what I was assuming, and somewhere in that gap between the two, my hand started shaking. My purse was still over my shoulder. My phone was in my hand. I opened the camera. The stairs in our house are original hardwood, 1940s construction. The realtor had described them as full of character, which was a polite way of saying every single step announces itself. I knew which ones to avoid. 3rd from the bottom, 7th from the top. I'd learned the map of our house the way you learn anything you live with long enough, without thinking about it, through repetition, through the ordinary accumulation of days. I made it to the top without a sound. The door to our bedroom was open maybe 4 inches. Enough. I didn't need more than that. I held my phone up, pressed record, and for 11 seconds I captured everything I needed. Then I walked back downstairs, picked up my carry-on, and left my own house. I sat in my car in the driveway for 22 minutes. I know, because I watched the clock on my dashboard the entire time, a little obsessively, like numbers could anchor me to something solid. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just watched the minutes change and let the information I'd seen settle somewhere inside me, the way sediment settles in water. Slowly, until it finds its level. The woman in my bedroom was my husband's coworker. I'd met her twice. Once at his company holiday party 2 years ago, once at a dinner in the spring where she'd sat across from me and complimented my earrings and asked where I'd gotten them. I told her. I'd even sent her the link afterward because she seemed genuinely interested. I thought about that now. I thought about it for a long time. My husband and I had been together for 6 years, married for 3. We bought this house 18 months ago, a 1940s colonial in a quiet suburb of Columbus, Ohio. More house than we needed for 2 people. But we'd talked about filling it eventually, about what that might look like, about the future in the loose and optimistic way you do when you're still in the part of a marriage that feels inevitable. His name is Aaron. He's 34. He works in commercial real estate finance, which means he spends a lot of time on the phone and a lot of time traveling and a lot of time explaining to me, patiently, why the deal he's currently working on is the most important thing happening in his professional life at this particular moment. There's always a deal. There's always a particular moment. I'm a product manager at a mid-sized software company. I travel maybe 6 times a year. I'm 31. I grew up in Cincinnati, moved to Columbus for grad school, met Aaron at a mutual friend's birthday party where he'd shown up late and apologized to everyone individually, which I'd found either charming or exhausting depending on the day. I'd married him. I believed in him. I'd reorganized my entire life around the shared architecture of us. I drove to a Marriott 12 minutes away and checked myself in. I want to be honest about the next few days because it would be easy to reframe them. to make myself sound more strategic or more composed than I was. The truth is, I mostly sat on the hotel bed eating room service and watching things I'd already seen on Netflix and answering Aaron's texts with one or two words. Tired. Long day. Talk tomorrow. He didn't push. He never pushed when it was inconvenient for him. I did 3 things during those days that mattered. First, I called my sister. Not to cry, though that happened, but because she's a paralegal in family law and I needed someone who could tell me what I was actually looking at, legally speaking. She talked me through the basics. Ohio was a no-fault divorce state, which means the footage I'd recorded would matter less in court than I'd initially thought. But it wasn't meaningless either, especially regarding asset division if I could demonstrate a pattern of financial deception alongside the affair. She told me to get a separate bank account before I did anything else. She told me to stop using her joint credit card. She told me not to tip my hand. Second, I transferred half of our shared savings into a new account in my name only. We had a little over $40,000 in that account. $20,000 is not a fortune, but it is a floor, and I needed a floor. Third, and this is the part that changed everything, though I didn't know it yet, I called my OBGYN. I'd been feeling off for about 2 weeks before the Portland trip, tired in a way that felt different from work tired, queasy in the mornings in a way I'd been attributing to stress. I'd taken a test in the hotel bathroom on my second morning there, the kind you buy at a CVS at 7 a.m., trying to look like you're not thinking about what you're about to find out. 2 lines. I sat on the edge of the hotel tub for a very long time. I want to say I felt something clear in that moment. Joy or grief or certainty. But what I actually felt was a kind of doubling, like 2 versions of reality briefly overlapping, and neither one being the one I'd prepared for. I was pregnant. I was also in the middle of finding out that my marriage was not what I thought it was. Both of those things were true simultaneously, and they did not resolve each other in any direction. My OB's office got me in for a confirmation appointment, and then I asked, carefully, quietly, the way you ask things you're not sure you're allowed to ask, about my options. All of them. My doctor was warm and completely matter-of-fact, the way good doctors are, and she gave me a referral. The referral was to a women's health clinic across town, Dr. Merritt. I hadn't chosen the clinic with any particular knowledge of who worked there. I'd chosen it because it had good reviews, because it was not near my neighborhood, and because it had an appointment available within the week. I showed up on a Thursday morning. The waiting room was calm and nondescript, the kind of space designed to feel neutral, unhurried. I checked in, filled out my paperwork, and sat down with a magazine I didn't read. When they called my name and I followed the nurse back to the procedure room, the doctor was already there, back turned, reviewing something on the counter. She turned around. I know her. I've known her for 3 years. I've sat at her family's Thanksgiving table. I've watched her argue good-naturedly with Aaron about college football standings and lose gracefully and refill everyone's wine. She is Aaron's older sister. Her name is Vivian. The room did one of those brief, terrible tilts, the kind where the floor seems to reconsider its commitment to staying horizontal. I watched her face go through the same sequence mine must have been going through. Recognition, confusion, recalibration. She had a chart in her hand. She knew why I was there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, very carefully, I need to ask if you'd like to see a different provider today. And I said, no. I don't know exactly why I said it. Maybe because switching would mean waiting longer, and I'd already been waiting in every sense for days. Maybe because I looked at her face in that moment and saw something I recognized, not guilt, not loyalty to her brother, but a kind of steady, professional gravity. She wasn't flustered. She wasn't about to make this about herself. Whatever she was feeling, she was containing it with a discipline I respected immediately. I need you to know, she said, that whatever you tell me, and whatever happens in this room today, is fully protected. You understand that? I understand, I said. She nodded once. Then she sat down across from me and said in the same measured tone she'd use for any patient, can you tell me what's brought you in today? So I told her. Not just the medical facts, all of it. I don't know why I did. Maybe because she was family, maybe because she was the first person who had asked me directly and with full attention. I told her about coming home early. About the mugs. About the recording. About the hotel. About the money I'd moved and the call with my sister and the 2 pink lines in a CVS bathroom at 7 a.m. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Did you know? I asked. About him and her? She took a breath. No, she said. I didn't know. I believed her. The specific quality of her composure told me this was someone absorbing a shock, not managing a pre-existing one. She asked me once if I was certain about my decision, not in a way that challenged it, but in the clinical way required of any provider confirming informed consent with a patient facing significant life circumstances. I told her I was certain. She accepted that. She moved forward. Afterward, when I was in recovery and she came to check on me before her next patient, she paused at the door. I have to ask you something, she said. As a doctor, not as anything else? Do you have somewhere safe to stay? Somewhere that's not that house? Yes, I said. The hotel. Good. She hesitated. I'm going to need some time to think through what I have to do next. I looked at her. You mean about Aaron? I mean about everything I just learned, she said carefully. There are things I can and can't do, but I want you to know I'm not going to pretend I didn't hear what you told me. I nodded. I didn't ask her what that meant. I was too tired to ask. I checked out of the Marriott 4 days later and moved into my sister's guest room in Clintonville. I had 1 suitcase, my laptop, and approximately $1,400 in a checking account separate from the one I'd funded with the savings transfer. I left Aaron a text that said, I know. I have the recording. Don't contact me except through a lawyer. He called 6 times in 20 minutes. Then he texted. Then he called again. I watched the notifications arrive and I did not answer any of them. My sister made chicken soup that night. We watched a documentary about national parks and didn't talk about Aaron for the entire runtime. I thought that was the kindest thing anyone had done for me in months. What happened next? I learned about gradually and secondhand, in the way you learn things when you're deliberately not in the room. Vivian called her brother. I don't know exactly what she said. I found out later that she didn't tell him she'd seen me, not at first. She told him that she knew he'd been having an affair and that she knew his wife had found out, and that whatever he thought he was managing, he had fundamentally misread the situation. He apparently told her it was complicated, that I didn't understand the pressure he was under, that things had been difficult between us for a while. The specific inventory of explanations men like Aaron reach for when they're trying to make the truth sound like a misunderstanding. Vivian told him to get a lawyer. The part that came out later, during the divorce proceedings, was something Vivian hadn't told me at the clinic. Aaron had been moving money, not large amounts, not dramatically but steadily over about 14 months. Cash withdrawals, charges to a credit card I didn't have visibility into, a transfer to a secondary account my name wasn't on. When Vivian confronted him, he admitted it. He apparently believed he could control the outcome of a divorce by restructuring his financial situation before I knew there was going to be one. What he had not accounted for was that his sister had grown up in the same house as him and knew exactly how his mind worked. She documented what he told her, kept records of their conversations. When my attorney filed a motion for full financial disclosure, Vivian provided a statement. I want to be precise here because I've thought about this a lot. Vivian did not betray her brother out of anger or vengeance, or because she'd chosen sides in a sentimental way people imagine family conflicts. She is someone who has spent her career making difficult decisions, with clarity and without self-indulgence, and I think she applied the same standard to her personal life. She'd learned that the person she thought she knew had been systematically deceiving his wife and quietly restructuring assets in anticipation of a legal proceeding. That information had a weight she wasn't willing to pretend it didn't have. She called me once, about 3 weeks after the clinic. She asked if I was okay. I said I was getting there. She said that she hoped things went the way they should. I said I thought they would. We didn't talk about Aaron at all. The divorce took 11 months. Ohio requires a waiting period for contested divorces, and Aaron contested several things before his attorney apparently advised him to stop. The asset division was more favorable to me than it would have been without Vivian's statement. The house sold for $387,000 SA. A good market, a well-maintained property, a realtor who knew what she was doing. My share of the equity, combined with what I'd moved in those early careful days, gave me enough to put a down payment on a condo in the short north. I have a second bedroom there that I'm figuring out what to do with. Sometimes I think about leaving it as an office. Sometimes I think about other possibilities. I'm not in a hurry anymore about anything that doesn't require urgency. There's a coffee shop 3 blocks from my condo that I've started going to on Saturday mornings. I bring my laptop, I work on things I want to work on, and nobody texts me anything that requires me to feel something I'm not ready to feel. The barista knows my order. The table by the window is usually available. The espresso machine there sounds nothing like the one in my old kitchen, which turns out to matter more than I expected. I don't think I'll hear from Vivian again, not really. There was no version of what happened where we come out of it as friends, but I think about her sometimes. I think about the moment she turned around in that procedure room, and her face moved through all those things, and she still managed to say exactly the right thing first. I've met a lot of people in my life who say they know the difference between loyalty and complicity. She's one of the few I've seen prove it. That distinction, I've learned, is rarer than it should be. And it costs something real to act on it. I hope, wherever Vivian is, that she knows I saw the cost. And I hope she knows it wasn't wasted. I keep coming back to the 2 mugs, not the recording, not the hotel room, not the moment Vivian turned around in that procedure room and her face did what faces do when something irreversible has just happened. I keep coming back to 2 ceramic mugs sitting on a kitchen island and the way they told me everything I needed to know before a single word was spoken. I think about what it cost me to stay quiet in that moment, to not run upstairs, to not scream, to just stand there, hold the phone up, and let the truth document itself. That kind of stillness doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from a decision, made in maybe 4 seconds, about what kind of person you're going to be when the worst thing happens. That decision, I've learned, is the one that shapes everything that comes after. Aaron made his decisions too. He moved money for 14 months. He built a quiet, careful exit strategy while we were still having dinner together and splitting the cost of a new water heater and talking vaguely about the future. He believed that intelligence meant anticipating the outcome and arranging things in his favor before I could. What he miscalculated was that rearranging facts doesn't change them. It just delays the accounting. The accounting always comes. Vivian didn't have to do what she did. Nobody would have faulted her for stepping back, recusing herself, staying neutral. She's his sister. The pull of that is real. I understand it. But she looked at what she knew, weighed it against what she believed about right and wrong, and chose not to pretend the 2 were compatible. That's not a small thing. That is the kind of moral clarity that most people talk about in the abstract and then quietly abandon when it requires something real from them. She didn't abandon it. She paid the cost of it, whatever that cost was, inside her own family, and she paid it without making it about herself. I've thought a lot about what carried me through those 11 months. It wasn't anger. Anger burns fast and leaves you depleted. It was something quieter. The $20,000 I moved in the first 48 hours, before I'd processed almost anything else. The call to my sister, the careful, deliberate steps taken before emotion had a chance to override judgment. I had to be smarter than my own panic, and I had to do it while I was also grieving, which is one of the harder things I've had to manage. What I know now is that those 3 things, knowing what's right, thinking clearly under pressure, and refusing to stop moving forward even when moving forward hurts, are not personality traits you're either born with or not. They're choices. They're practices. Vivian practiced them. I practiced them imperfectly through a lot of room service and Netflix, and one very long conversation with my sister in her kitchen at midnight. The condo in the short north is mine. The coffee shop 3 blocks away is mine. Saturday mornings are mine. I earned all of it the same way. One careful, honest, difficult decision at a time.